All right, guys, and to round out everything from D23 Brazil, surprisingly a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, we talked about Andor, we talked about Cap 4, we talked about Thunderbolts, but Kevin Feige also gave a lot of interesting quotes here that I wanted to dive into and dissect a little bit here before we end the podcast. So, there was a lot because I wasn't, I don't think many were able to watch the actual presentation here, but we got updates from the usual sites and, MCU The Direct or Discussing Film. We got a lot of updates here. And I think a lot of these things were things that maybe we thought, but, got official confirmation from Kevin Feige. Other things were maybe things that we wondered about. And now I've gotten updates from Kevin Feige. And so I just wanted to run through basically all the quotes that he gave. It's not a whole lot, but I think what he said in those quotes is definitely a whole lot. And so some really interesting stuff here, ranging from Blade, ranging from Miles Morales and the X-Men and all these different things. So let's get into it, guys. Let's talk about these. I think it's 5 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 things to talk about here, quotes to read and kind of dissect, as I usually like to do here with these quotes from, direct sources, right? It's kind of rare that we get to talk about things that people from from inside Marvel are actually talking about here, which is really interesting. So the first thing, Deadpool and Wolverine. And I'm going in a random order. Not random. I'm going in order of basically things that I think are maybe minor or things that we knew for sure or we kind of suspected for sure, all the way up until perhaps the most consequential thing that he said, which maybe you guys will disagree with the order, but this is just the way that I wanted to frame this discussion. So Deadpool and Wolverine. Kevin Feige gave a quote about when we might see Deadpool and Wolverine next. And he said, the plans with Deadpool and Wolverine will always be the same. We're always wondering, where we can fit them in and how fast. So really interesting because I think for Deadpool, that makes sense, right? It's Ryan Reynolds and he's obviously one of the biggest stars in Hollywood and everything like that. And you wanted him back as Deadpool. Deadpool and Wolverine made $1.33 billion. It's incredible, or something like that, $1.3+ billion. But the interesting thing here is about Hugh Jackman, right? Because I think he includes Hugh Jackman in that as well. And I think that that's also really interesting because, you kind of wondered, was Hugh Jackman done with Wolverine at this point? Was he going to come back? And it seems like Kevin Feige, at the very least, is saying, yeah, we want to look at, having Hugh Jackman back. So that is interesting. He might just be saying that, and Hugh Jackman might be like, nope, I'm done. Don't bring me back. I don't want to work out for 6 hours a day, and I don't want to eat 7,000 calories a day. I'm done. Totally fair, by the way. He gave us an awesome performance in Deadpool and Wolverine that was just very different from the kind of Wolverine that we had been seeing before. Logan, I love Logan. Logan will always be special. It doesn't matter if Deadpool wants to desecrate on the memory of Logan, the movie. I still love Logan, and I don't think it changed anything. I think it was a brilliant balance of having a different Wolverine, literally a different Wolverine than the one in Logan. So we'll see. We'll see if Hugh Jackman shows up. I would be kind of surprised if he just doesn't at least show up for a little bit in Secret Wars at the very least, but we'll have to see about that. Next comment, number 2, that he made was on Miles Morales, surprisingly. And the quote's kind of interesting, honestly, as to the timing of the whole thing. But let's read it here. So Kevin Feige said, Miles Morales, will appear in the 3rd Spider-Verse movie, which is Beyond the Spider-Verse, which is in production. That's true. We talked about this a few weeks ago on the podcast. And then he continues, I hope that shortly after that, he can enter the MCU in live action. Interesting. Okay, so it seems like something here, because Miles Morales is a character just like Peter Parker that is shared between Sony and Marvel. And I think that there are clauses in that contract that make it more difficult for characters like Peter Parker to just willy-nilly cross over. I think there's a reason that you can't just have a live-action Amazing Spider-Man 3 at the same time that Marvel and Sony are developing Spider-Man 4. I think there is something in that agreement. I don't know the full details of the agreement as it relates to Miles Morales, but this seems to indicate that it's not sort of a willingness thing. I'm sure Kevin Feige would love to have Miles Morales come into the MCU, but maybe more of a contractual thing. Honestly, that, as soon as they're done with Beyond the Spider-Verse, and presumably with the character, although who knows, maybe as long as Sony is making movies with Miles Morales, maybe that's how they reinvigorate their Spider-Man franchise, because my goodness, Venom 3, Morbius, Madam Web, Kraven the Hunter, which, could be great, but we'll see. They need some help. They really need some help. And if they want to retain the rights to the characters, they got to keep making these movies. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, and we'll have to see. But yeah, it seems like Miles Morales won't be coming for quite a while, because I would be very skeptical if Beyond the Spider-Verse doesn't come out, or if Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out before late 2026, if not 2027. I would target probably fall 2026 onwards. So it's going to be a while, because at that point, then they have to finish. And then, maybe at that point, Marvel can start to develop their live action Miles Morales movie. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But maybe what that means also is that we can have Spider-Man 5, and then we'll see what happens after Spider-Man 5. Maybe he shows up in Spider-Man 6. I don't know. We're thinking way in the future here, but that's what these quotes indicate. So there is that. The third thing he talked about is Blade. Is Blade happening, basically? And here's the quote. I put this here, because I think that it's interesting, right? Sorry about the honking in the background. It's interesting because this is something where if you're a public-facing executive like Kevin Feige, how much do we take his words at face value? Usually he's pretty honest and pretty cagey when he has to be. So we'll see how much of this whole Blade situation is just kind of a PR saving face kind of thing. But this is what he said about Blade. He said, whenever we change direction with a project or are still trying to figure out how it fits into our schedule, we let the public know. Okay, interesting. It doesn't seem like you've been updating us that much on Blade. We've been hearing about all these things in the trades, in the Hollywood Reporter and stuff like that. But, we'll continue on with the quote. And he continues by saying, you're up to date with what's happening, but I can tell you that the character will indeed make it to the MCU. Again, I don't know. I'm a little iffy because this seems a little bit like PR speak to me, honestly. It doesn't quite seem like... It just feels the most PR thing that Kevin Feige has said in a long while. Because honestly, what's he going to say? I think I don't know what the exact structure of this panel was. I don't know if these are questions, if this was an interview style. But if somebody asked him point blank what's happening with Blade, what's he going to say? It's dead. Until Marvel officially makes that announcement, because Blade was taken off the release calendar, right? So it's getting closer to what we can call maybe official death or cancellation or whatever we want to call it. But Kevin Feige gets up there and he's like, he's coming in the MCU. Now, notice he didn't say, we're making a Blade movie. We're still making the Blade movie. So maybe they're committed to maybe Mahershala is like, look, I really wanted this Blade movie. I get it. It's not happening. Can I at least show up in Secret Wars or Doomsday? Maybe that's what's going to happen. Eternals 2, if that ever happens. I don't know. But yeah, guys, this is one where I'm interested because I'm skeptical about what Kevin Feige said here. So there's that. The fourth thing that Kevin Feige said here relates to our favorite character, Wanda Maximoff, who we've been talking about nonstop basically ever since Agatha All Along started, because the question has always been, is Wanda ever going to come back as Scarlet Witch? We talked about a potential Scarlet Witch movie a few weeks ago. We talked about Jack Schaefer's comments last week. We also talked about Elizabeth Olsen's comments last week. And it seems like Kevin Feige is just pouring oil onto this fire, because he said this about Wanda Maximoff. He said, we recently had Agatha Darkhold Diaries, which I don't know if this was a transcription error from the people who I took this quote from, the direct, or not. I'm completely assuming that the direct just basically pulled a direct quote from Kevin Feige. And if he actually said Agatha Darkhold Diaries, that's really funny, because it means that internally the show didn't really have a title, because, the whole joke was that, we changed the title. If you don't remember, it was Agatha Coven of Chaos. No, it was Agatha House of Harkness at one point, and then Coven of Chaos, and then it was Darkhold Diaries, and then it was finally Agatha All Along. And the showrunners were all like, it was a whole thing. We wanted to kind of play into the mysteriousness and mischievousness of Agatha. Honestly, I think that they just had such a terrible time making up their minds that they just couldn't figure out what they were going to do. So the fact that Kevin Feige had referred to it as Darkhold Diaries, if that is indeed what he did, is kind of funny, honestly. But anyways, let me start over. We recently had Agatha Darkhold Diaries, Agatha All Along, on Disney+, and that series was great for us. I agree. It was pretty good. Since then, many questions about Wanda have lingered in fans' minds. So all I can say is that we're excited to find out when and how Scarlet Witch might return. So again, Kevin Feige, he's a human being. He can, use words that are meant to imply one thing and are taken to mean another entirely by fans, because that's exactly what fans do. That is exactly what fans do. So, we don't know. Maybe Kevin Feige was being a little bit more loose with his words than he actually meant to be. But if we're gonna lean into the fact that Kevin Feige usually is very careful, very, very careful with his words, and we dissect this quote a little bit, he does say when and how. Not if and when, but when and how Scarlet Witch might return. And he's been doing interviews lately where he doesn't debunk the fact that, she might return. So it leads me, just again, if I was maybe 50-50 by the time Agatha premiered, about a month and a half ago, I'm now at about 70-30 that she's going to show up again. Now, again, I've always said this. I don't think it's going to be a Scarlet Witch movie. I don't think it's going to be her as the big, character in the X-Men mutant saga. I don't think that's the case. A lot of people are like, she's going to have her own movie and Jean Grey's going to show up. I'm like, no, I don't really think so. But I buy the fact more that maybe she has a bigger part in something like Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, for example. I buy that a lot more. That I'm at about 70-30 with, that she's going to do it. If she has her own film, I'm still maybe 30-70, the flip side of that. So we'll have to see. But it looks like, it's just increasingly looking like Elizabeth Olsen's going to return at some point soon. And finally, Kevin Feige, in the fifth point, has addressed the future after Secret Wars, especially including the X-Men. So this is a little bit of a longer quote here that we're going to read. This is what Kevin Feige had to say about the X-Men after Secret Wars. He says, "When we were preparing for Avengers Endgame years ago, it was about reaching the big finale of our narrative, and after that, we had to start everything over again. This time, on the road to Secret Wars, we already knew very well what the story will be up until that point and beyond. The X-Men are an important part of that future." So again, he ends the quote by saying the X-Men are a very important part of that future. I think it was in reference to a question about the X-Men here. And again, that's interesting because, I think what the acknowledgement here is that the planning behind the Infinity Saga and the planning behind the Multiverse Saga are very different. The Infinity Saga, I think, was all encompassing. It was obviously 11 years in the making or something like that. It was crazy. It was so big, right? But, I think that now with the Mutant Saga, the Multiverse Saga, a little bit of a Freudian slip on my part, the Multiverse Saga here, I think there is an acknowledgement that, maybe we wanted the Multiverse Saga initially to be as expansive as the Infinity Saga was or whatever, but it's just not working. And the focus now is going to be the X-Men. And I think that is something we knew, but I think that is an official piece of confirmation that is the direction they're heading towards now, and that they acknowledge that, after Secret Wars, we're going to pivot to X-Men. And honestly, the little implicit, and this is just me reading into it way too much, so don't take anything to the bank. The little implicit piece of information that I get from it here is that Kevin Feige isn't done just yet. People were speculating, is Kevin Feige going to retire after the Multiverse Saga or whatever? Even after the Infinity Saga, is he done? I don't think so. I think he has one last hurdle to climb, and I think that's mutants. I think if the mutant saga lasts, 10 years after this, that's great. And then after that point, as soon as he's done with the X-Men, do whatever you want, Kevin Feige. Go to Star Wars, go to DC, do whatever you want. But I think Kevin Feige has one more hurdle to climb, and that is getting the X-Men right before he retires from Marvel. We'll see. But guys, those were a lot of really interesting tidbits from Kevin Feige himself. He always has a lot of interesting things to say whenever he talks. And I'd be really interested to hear what you guys have to think about all of these things in the comments down below. So guys, let me know which one was the most interesting to you, and let me know what you think about any of these in the comments below.